Hi. Now we're going to talk about instruments, positioning, and how best to cue and prompt our students. There is such a wealth of just beautiful, wonderful looking and sounding instruments now. And all of our students, special needs or not, deserve that kind of sound and quality. And so while something like a turbano of this size might be really difficult for students to play, especially if they're in a wheelchair with a lap tape tray or something, there are also finger drums with a great sound that can be placed on the tray or held more easily for those students. And so as you're looking and being a detective to figure out what works best for students, think about the weight and the size of the instruments. And while everyone loves an ocean drum, it's big, it's heavy, but it also comes in a smaller size. And the same goes for a tambourine. There's no reason not to have a great sounding, washable head sounding tambourine. Again, when these drums look so big, Remo makes a series called Sound Shapes that has a great sound, but is light, is small, and is very washable. It also lets our students have a choice, because so often those students get given an instrument as opposed to which one do you want, orange or green, circle or square. The other thing about positioning is that so often we assume instruments are supposed to be played right in front, midline, two hands alternating, and that's hard. I had one little guy, and I realized, he's keeping a steady beat. He's keeping a steady beat back here with his elbow. Up here in front, he couldn't reach, couldn't get the control, kept coming back towards this, and found for him, by jingos, once we got back here to his side and going back and behind, he could keep a steady beat all the time. I'll never forget the day the occupational therapist went by, stopped, came back, and came in and said, wait a minute, how is he doing that? And it was using what I saw, because I knew he could keep a steady beat. We just had to get it to where he had the full motor control to do that. And so you start looking at our mallets and thinking, and you realize, for some students, this much or the length of a mallet creates all kinds of problems and issues. And so you think about and you look at how long they are, because that makes a difference. It makes a difference in the locus of your control and how much energy and force. For one young man, when we got to this, that was it. He could keep control. It gave him what he needed. For other students, I want a longer mallet, and you'll see a picture of this in a little bit, because I want the SEA, the special ed assistant, to be working back here instead of doing. There's a much more sense of independence and hearing the student. Now, you may feel that you can't give some of your special needs students or other students certain instruments because they can't control how loud it is and what it sounds like. Well, again, that's what different head mallets are for. To make sure the sound is what we want, and if we have to assist by choosing that. Now, a lot of times, the mallet handle is just too fine a grip for some of our students. And again, talk to your occupational therapist. A piece of foam might make all the difference in that student being independent and able to participate. Sensory. I am so sorry I do not have one of my mini cabasas here. I have found the cabasa as just a really engaging instrument for many of my students on the autism spectrum. That sense of feel as they roll over it or have someone roll it in their hand. Another thing that has just been a real engager and motivator to first these things and then you may have a turn has been, we call it a caterpillar. has been just a real engaging kind of instrument for our students. Remember to use your visuals. You can see that. So that you can manage the classroom in a simple way. Again, thinking again that for all of your students, folks deserve to be part of the group, to be included. And that means, you know, if everyone is using a pick, then find one that's the right size for your student so they too can participate. Those kinds of things are available. Again, your occupational therapist, your music therapist, we're all available to consult and provide some information. One final thing that I found really helpful is TheraBand, the stretchy cord, and I use it often during folk dances when I have students who might not be mobile enough to be able to do the dances, or students who are in the wheelchairs. Some students might play instruments during that time, but in order to get that feel of the dance, I often have a group using this a TheraBand. So they'd be sitting in a circle, and again, for someone with limited mobility, just simply putting their hands over it and feeling the rest of the group as you all of a sudden you're part of the group and you've got a sense of what everybody's doing. Again, safety first. If your group can't be respectful, if they can't manage the amount of movement and stuff safely, think through all of that first. The other thing, just to kind of remind all of us, all of these things can be wiped out. And that's just going to be an important part of our future. So thinking about the positioning, be a detective. Don't just assume it has to be here. Think of the ways that you can truly include your students. And now I've got some video examples and some different ways for you to think about how to prompt and engage students. This section is about prompting. It's a hierarchy. You really want to think about using the least amount of assistance that you possibly can. And this will help you have your students be as independent and as successful in your classroom as possible. Prompt hierarchy. A prompt is something that causes or brings about the action. It's an assist and an encouragement. So again, I'm going to say it again. We want our students to be as independent as possible and to rely on prompts and cues as little as possible. Gestural prompts provides the information, and music, we are all about the gestural prompt. That's what conducting is. And the caveat here is to be ensure that you are explicit in your teaching so that students, English learners, everyone understands what is stop, what is louder, what those your gestures really mean. Visual prompts, we've talked about those, but remember, when you can just gesture to the visual prompt, you don't have to say it. You can use it to remind students, and again, let them be independent. Oh yeah, raise my hand in this classroom. Visuals are both a prompt and a way of communication for many of our students. Having a core board helps them say, I want, and make choices. Of course, we have verbal prompts. But a verbal prompt can be indirect or it can be direct. So an indirect prompt might be, what do you do when the music stops? So you're eliciting, you're encouraging the independent response to that. This is different than a direct prompt of put the instrument on the floor. Modeling. This is where you're demonstrating the skill or part of the skill. A really valuable model are the other students in the classroom. Research shows that you're more likely to model someone who is similar to you. And having the students provide the model makes sure that everyone understands what kind of response you're looking for. things to notice there. She modeled, he joined, she changed the model to something that was harder. She didn't touch him or grab him. She gave him wait time, and he started to copy and imitate Alpha the model. And then she backed off a little bit, and again, what I saw was a gestural prompt. She kept going with her head, as we often do. And again, she had faded herself out. Our model student was continuing to play, and she allowed him to end independently because the music stopping functioned as the cue for him. So he stopped independently using the music as a cue. He didn't need to have the adult in the room giving him an extra prompt or cue. I'm going to keep coming back to that because I see so often we tend to over prompt and over cue our students, and they just get used to relying on us. So the physical prompts can be full or partial. And you think of a full prompt as that kind of hand over hand, but I'm going to let you know that often coming under someone's hand is much less intrusive and is much easier for them to then have you fade away and have them be more independent.
Mama says you'll play, this is a work day. Up with the bright sun, get all the work done. If you will help me climb up the tall tree, shake up a papaya down.
That hand over hand comes in and is really intrusive. What about doing it this way?
Mama says you'll play, this is a work day. Up with the bright sun, get all the work done. If you will help.
A really important thing about supporting mallet play that way is that the student gets a sense of independence, and you can really feel where they are and how they're doing. I had one young man I was consulting on where the complaint was he's throwing things. And what I realized was when I was holding the mallet this way, he was in complete control until he got to here. And if he got too excited or got his arm back, he just lost motorically. He lost the ability to grip. So the thing I needed to do was just help him learn to keep his arm down. And so this is a partial physical prompt, but even more importantly, it's allowing that independence by the way the mallet support is happening. This is a real prime example of over prompting. This student happens to be blind, and the person just brought the board 4 beats, 4 places to put a beat, and immediately grabbed his hands. So it's hand over hand, and it really is a case of over prompting. Because if she said, I'm going to put something in front of you, reach out, the student was exploring independently and able to feel and reach and be, again, independent in his exploration and his learning of class material. We want to assume competence. So many of our students, when they hear a rhythm or a pattern or see it over time, they can play it.
Mama says you'll play, this is a work day. Up with the bright sun, get all the work done. If you will help me climb up the tall tree, shake up a papaya down.
And giving that opportunity. If they can't do it, then that's where we simplify. Orff is outstanding. You don't have to play 5, do, re, mi. You can just play the do. And being sure that we simplify where appropriate, for independence. Now, one thing that makes a big difference for all of our students is placement. Sometimes having something further out in front and allowing the arm extension makes a difference, and you get some real independent playing. Other times, you need to adjust where the drum is.
Mama says no play, this is a work day. Up with the bright sun, get all the work done. If you will help me climb up the tall tree, shake the papaya down.
And as I talked about before, remember that positioning, be a detective. It's different for every student, because if they have cerebral palsy, if they have hemiplegia, their motor control is different for every child. And we have to explore and see what is going to work the very best for them. So this is another one of my pet peeves. See if you can figure out. There's a tendency to just take things away from students, especially students with special needs, and not to ask or be respectful of the space. And so I would say, be sure she gave him an all down sign and then waited. One of my favorite things is just a little bucket, and then you've taken away that hand. But I see that often students' peers have learned to just take things as opposed to waiting and being respectful like they would with their other peers. And so sometimes having a basket for the individual who's collecting things helps all the students be more appropriate with their peers. So remember, prompting is on a hierarchy, and you want to look at it and you want to go from most to least. And if you've helped at one level for a while, think about how do you back it off? How do you make it different? How do you make it less, so that then we are really able to include everyone in the music making? Because that's what we're all about as music educators. We want everyone to be included and to be having a very enjoyable time. I hope this has been helpful for you. If you have any questions, reach out to Perpich. They know where to find me. And have a wonderful summer, and we will see what teaching is like in the fall. Take care.